December 18th, 1978. Roberts Lounge, South Ozone Park, Queens. 7 days after the biggest cash robbery in American history. Pink Cadillacs in the parking lot. Mink coats hanging over chairs. Gold chains thick enough to anchor a boat. Envelopes stuffed with $100 bills passing from hand to hand. The crew that pulled off the Lufthansa heist is celebrating. They're drinking, laughing, showing off, and Jimmy Burke is watching, not celebrating, watching. Because what looks like a party to everyone else looks like evidence to him. Evidence that will get them all killed or locked up. This isn't a celebration, it's a lineup. And in the weeks that follow, almost everyone in that room will die. This was the Christmas party scene in Goodfellas. The movie shows it as a moment of joy turning to paranoia. But the real story is colder. The murders that followed weren't paranoia, they were strategy. They were Jimmy Burke eliminating liabilities one by one. And the party, that was the test. The men who failed it, who couldn't resist flashing their share of $5 million, signed their own death warrants. Because in organized crime, the most dangerous moment isn't during the heist. It's what you do after, how you act, what you buy, who you tell. And that Christmas party revealed exactly who understood that rule and who didn't. This is the story of how the biggest score in mob history turned into a bloodbath, how celebration became evidence, how showing off became a death sentence, and how Jimmy Burke went from mastermind to executioner, killing his own crew to protect himself. Because here's what Goodfellas never explained. The Christmas party wasn't just a party, it was an audit, and the penalty for failing was murder. Let's start 7 days earlier, December 11th, 1978, 3:17 a.m. The Lufthansa cargo terminal at John F. Kennedy International Airport. 6 armed men wearing masks walked into the vault. They pistol-whipped the guards. They loaded cash and jewelry into a van. 45 minutes later, they drove away with $5 million in cash and $875,000 in jewelry. Total haul, $5.875 million. At the time, the largest cash robbery ever committed on American soil. The crew was handpicked by Jimmy Burke. James Burke, 47 years old, Irish-American, associate of the Lucchese crime family. Burke couldn't be made because he wasn't Italian. But he was one of the most respected criminals in New York. Smart, ruthless, patient. He ran his operations out of Roberts Lounge, a bar in Queens that served as a hub for hijackers, fences, and killers. Burke had been planning the Lufthansa job for months. The tip came from Martin Krugman, a wig shop owner and bookie who had a contact inside the airport. Louis Werner, a Lufthansa cargo supervisor buried in gambling debts. Werner told Krugman about the monthly cash shipments. Krugman told Henry Hill. Hill told Burke. And Burke assembled the crew. The robbers were Tommy DeSimone, 28, a psychopath and killer already responsible for multiple murders. Angelo Sepe, 31, another killer, methodical and cold. Louis Cafora, 37, nicknamed Roast Beef, a hijacker with a reputation for reliable work. Joe Manry, Paolo Licastri, Robert McMahon, all experienced criminals. All chosen because Burke trusted them to do the job and keep quiet after. They did the job perfectly. No shots fired, no witnesses killed. The van driven away cleanly. The guards couldn't identify anyone. The FBI had no leads. It was a textbook heist. And if the crew had just stayed quiet, they might have gotten away with it. But they didn't stay quiet. The first problem came within hours. Parnell Edwards, 31 years old, African-American. He wasn't a real crew member. He was used for errands, the kind of jobs you give someone when you need a problem handled, not a partner involved. Edwards wasn't on the robbery crew. His job was simple. After the heist, dispose of the getaway van. Drive it to a location in New Jersey. Set it on fire. Destroy the evidence. That's it. One job. Edwards got paid $10,000 for that job. 10,000 for one night's work. Edwards didn't do it. He got high. He fell asleep. The van sat parked on a street in Brooklyn with its doors unlocked. Inside, police found fingerprints, tire tracks, forensic evidence linking it directly to the heist. The FBI immediately connected Edwards to Burke's crew. They started surveillance. They started asking questions. And Burke realized the first domino had fallen. According to Henry Hill's testimony, Burke's reaction was immediate. Edwards had to go. On December 18th, 7 days after the heist, Tommy DeSimone and Angelo Sepe shot Parnell Edwards 6 times in the head. They dumped his body in a parked car in Brooklyn. Edwards was the first to die. He wouldn't be the last. You probably laughed at this moment in Goodfellas when Tommy looks at Angelo and says, "Make that coffee to go." It plays like a dark joke. In real life, that line wasn't comedy. It was a death sentence delivered casually, in the middle of an ordinary day. Now, here's where the Christmas party comes in. The movie version shows it happening right after the heist. In reality, the party took place later, probably late December, early January. The crew was gathering at Robert's Lounge, some to collect their shares, some to celebrate, some just to be around the action. And Jimmy Burke was there, watching. Louis Cafora pulled up in a brand new white Cadillac Fleetwood, not a pink Cadillac like the movie shows, but close enough. A massive, expensive car that screamed new money. Cafora bought it for his wife, Joanna. He paid cash. He didn't even try to hide it. In the movie, Burke confronts a guy named Johnny Roastbeef about a pink Cadillac. That character was based on Cafora, and the scene is accurate in spirit, if not in detail. Burke saw that car and knew Cafora was a problem. Inside the bar, men were wearing fur coats. Not cheap ones. Mink, sable, coats that cost thousands of dollars. Gold chains, diamond rings, designer clothes. Henry Hill later testified that the party looked like a fashion show. Everyone wanted to look like they'd made it, like they were winners, and Burke was furious. Here's what you have to understand. In organized crime, after a major score, the rule is simple. Disappear. Don't spend. Don't talk. Don't draw attention. Go back to your normal life. Live like nothing happened. Because the moment you start spending, you become visible. The FBI notices. Your neighbors notice. Other criminals notice. And visibility after a heist is evidence. It's a confession without words. Burke had told his crew this. According to Henry Hill, Burke explicitly warned them, "Don't buy anything. Don't change your routine. Don't act like you just made money. Wait. Let the heat die down. Then, slowly, carefully, you can start enjoying the cash. But not immediately. Not 7 days later. Not at a public party where everyone can see." Most of the crew ignored him. And Burke took notes. Think about it from Burke's perspective. He's sitting in Robert's Lounge. The FBI is already investigating. They found the van. They're watching the bar. They're tailing known associates. And Burke's crew is parading around in mink coats and Cadillacs. Every one of those purchases is a thread the FBI can pull. They can trace the sales, check the bank accounts, interview the dealers, build a case. And once they build a case, someone will talk. Someone will make a deal. Someone will give up Burke. Burke couldn't let that happen. He had 2 options. Option 1, hope the FBI doesn't put it together. Hope his crew stays quiet under pressure. Hope nobody flips. Or option 2, eliminate the threats. Kill anyone who could implicate him. Make sure there are no witnesses left to testify. Burke chose option 2. Martin Krugman was next. Krugman, the wig shop owner who brought Burke the tip about Lufthansa. Krugman wasn't on the heist crew, but he knew everything. He knew the plan. He knew the players. And after the robbery, Krugman started demanding his share. According to Henry Hill, Krugman was promised $500,000. But Burke stalled. He told Krugman to wait, to be patient, to stay quiet. Krugman didn't listen. He kept calling, kept showing up at the bar, kept asking for his money. He became a pest, and pests get swatted. In early January 1979, Marty Krugman disappeared. According to Henry Hill's testimony, the crew decided he was a liability after the Lufthansa heist and needed to be dealt with. Krugman was never seen again, and his body was never recovered. His wife reported him missing, and the FBI investigated his disappearance in connection with the heist, but without a body or physical evidence, there was no case. In the world of organized crime, men who know too much often vanish without a trace, and Krugman was one of the first of many loose ends to be eliminated. Then came Richard Eaton. Eaton wasn't a major robber in the Lufthansa heist. He was a Florida restaurant and club owner who had ties to the crew's fencing and money movement operations and was seen as someone who knew too much. In December 1978, Eaton was shot multiple times and his body was found hogtied and frozen in a refrigerated truck, an execution that law enforcement linked to Jimmy Burke's cleanup. Burke would later be convicted of Eaton's murder in 1985, one of the few Lufthansa-related killings to lead to a conviction. Then came Paolo Licastri. Licastri wasn't one of the masked gunmen who stormed the Lufthansa cargo terminal. He didn't plan the mechanics of the robbery, and he didn't carry a weapon that night. His role was political. Licastri was a Gambino family associate whose presence ensured the job was sanctioned and that the Gambinos received their cut. He knew about the heist. A month later after the heist, the bullet-riddled corpse of Sicilian drug trafficker Paolo Licastri was found on a burning trash heap in Brooklyn. Another liability eliminated. Kafora had begun spending Lufthansa money openly, drawing attention Burke couldn't afford. According to Henry Hill's testimony, Burke ordered both of them killed. Not just Kafora, his wife too. She had seen the money. She knew who was involved. In the aftermath of Lufthansa, that made her a liability. Their bodies were never recovered. 2 more people were erased during the cleanup. Then Tommy DeSimone, Burke's most reliable killer, the man who shot Parnell Edwards, the man who helped kill Krugman. Tommy was 32 years old, a stone-cold psychopath and Burke's personal enforcement. But Tommy had a problem. He'd killed Billy Batts, a made man in the Gambino family, back in 1970. The Gambinos wanted revenge, and they were willing to wait for it. In January 1979, Tommy was told he was being made, inducted into the Lucchese family. It was the call he'd been waiting for his whole life. On January 14th, Tommy went to a house in Queens for the ceremony. He walked in, he never walked out. John Gotti, then a rising capo in the Gambino family, was there. Tommy was shot multiple times. Revenge for Billy Batts. His body was never found, and Burke, according to Hill, didn't try to stop it. Tommy knew too much, and with him gone, Burke had one less problem. Angelo Sepe, who helped carry out post-heist murders, including the killing of Parnell Stacks Edwards, was himself murdered on the 18th of July, 1984. He and his girlfriend, Joanne Lombardo, were found shot to death in a Brooklyn apartment basement. The slaying was treated as a mob execution, and no one was formally charged. In total, at least 6 to 10 people connected to the crime met violent ends or disappeared under suspicious circumstances. Some were directly involved in the robbery. Some were associates who knew too much. Some were peripheral figures whose knowledge became dangerous once law enforcement pressure mounted. Some talked when they should have stayed quiet. Others showed off when disappearing was the only safe move. They failed the test. Jimmy Burke didn't fail. Burke was careful. He didn't buy Cadillacs. He didn't wear mink coats. He stayed in his routine. He kept running Robert's Lounge. He acted like nothing had happened, and for years it worked. The FBI suspected him. They surveilled him. They questioned him. But they couldn't prove anything. The witnesses were dead. The money was gone. The evidence was thin. Henry Hill survived because he made a choice that few in his world ever would. In 1980, he was arrested on federal drug charges and faced the very real prospect of life in prison, and with it, the danger of being killed by the very crew he'd spent years serving. To avoid that fate, Hill agreed to cooperate with federal authorities. He provided extensive testimony about the Lufthansa heist, the murders that followed, and how Jimmy Burke and others systematically eliminated potential liabilities. Hill and his family were placed in the Federal Witness Security Program and turned against the mob. But even Hill's testimony wasn't enough to convict Burke for Lufthansa. Too much time had passed. Too many witnesses were dead. The statute of limitations on some charges had expired. Burke walked on the heist itself, but he didn't walk on everything. In 1982, Burke was convicted of the murder of Richard Eaton, whose body had been found hogtied inside a refrigerated truck. He was also convicted of point shaving in college basketball, a separate case the FBI built while investigating Lufthansa. Jimmy Burke died in prison on April 13, 1996. He was 64 years old. He never admitted to the Lufthansa heist. He never admitted to the murders. He died keeping his secrets. So what does this story reveal? It reveals the economics of paranoia. The movie version of The Christmas Party shows Burke as a man losing control, going crazy, killing out of fear and rage. But the reality is colder. Burke wasn't paranoid. He was pragmatic. He did the math. Every person who knew about the heist was a potential witness. Every person who spent money was a liability. And the cost of letting them live, the risk of prosecution, outweighed the benefit of keeping them around. This is how organized crime actually works. After a major score, the people who did the job become the biggest threat. They know too much. They can testify, they can make deals, and the moment law enforcement applies pressure, someone will crack. So the smart move, the ruthless move, is to eliminate them before they get the chance. The Christmas Party was the moment Burke realized he had to act. He saw his crew celebrating, spending, drawing attention, and he understood that their stupidity was his death sentence, unless he acted first. Here's the thing about the Lufthansa heist. It was perfect in execution, textbook planning, flawless operation, but the aftermath was chaos, because most criminals can't handle success. They can't stay disciplined. They can't resist the urge to show off, to prove they're winners, to enjoy the money immediately. And that impulse, that need for validation, gets them killed. The men who survived Lufthansa were the ones who stayed quiet, who didn't show up to the party, who didn't buy Cadillacs, who understood that the heist wasn't over just because they got away with the cash. The real challenge was staying invisible, staying patient, waiting for the heat to die. And most of them couldn't do it. Goodfellas never explains this. The movie shows the murders as tragedy, as Burke going crazy, as paranoia spiraling out of control. But the reality is calculated. Burke wasn't losing his mind. He was protecting himself, and every murder made sense. Every elimination removed a threat. It was strategic violence, business decisions wrapped in bloodshed. The Christmas Party scene in Goodfellas is memorable because it captures a feeling, the joy of success, the thrill of easy money, the camaraderie of a crew that just pulled off the impossible. But it doesn't capture the subtext, the cold reality that everyone in that room was being evaluated, that the party was a test, and that the penalty for failing was a bullet in the head. Jimmy Burke understood something most criminals don't. The score isn't the end, it's the beginning of a new set of problems. How to hide the money, how to avoid prosecution, how to keep everyone quiet. And the best way to keep people quiet is to make sure they can't talk, ever. That's the lesson of Lufthansa, not the heist itself, the aftermath, the cleanup, the cold, brutal logic of eliminating witnesses, 10 people dead, millions of dollars vanished. One man in prison, dying without ever admitting what he did. And a story that Hollywood turned into entertainment but never fully explained. Because explaining it would reveal how power really works. Not through loyalty, not through honor, but through calculation, through the willingness to kill anyone who becomes a liability. Through the understanding that the biggest threat after a crime isn't law enforcement, it's the people who helped you commit it. The Christmas party in Goodfellas looks like celebration, but it was a funeral for men who didn't know they were already dead, for a crew that failed the only test that mattered: stay invisible. Stay quiet, stay alive. They celebrated instead, and Jimmy Burke made them pay for it. If this deep dive into the real aftermath of the Lufthansa heist opened your eyes to how mob power actually works, hit that subscribe button. We drop untold organized crime stories every single week. Stories that go beyond Hollywood and into the cold, calculated reality. Drop a comment below. What mob story do you think has been misunderstood? What killing or heist should we investigate next? Let us know. Because at Mafia Talks, we don't just retell the legends. We show you how the game is actually played, and why the winners are the ones who know when to disappear.